Good morning, colleagues. Imina 37 na Legislature in Guam is called to order. This is our second regular session in 2024, the first session that we will be holding. Majority Leader, you are recognized. Acting Majority Leader Tina Munoz-Barnes, Senator Tina Munoz-Barnes, you are recognized.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to waive notwithstanding Section 1.02 Session of the Legislature in Guam H1, privileges of the floor, persons allowed, and this is to allow the students of Simon Sanchez High School on the session floor.
On the motion to waive notwithstanding Section 1.02, privileges of the floor, to allow the students of Simon Sanchez High School, particularly La Voce, right, choir, at Simon Sanchez onto our session floor. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, motion carries. For the prayer, will Senator Fisher kindly lead us in prayer? Please rise.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking you, Madam Speaker, for extending this honor to me. This is, I think, the first time we've gathered together with my brothers and sisters here, the 37th Guam Legislature, and in the final year of the 37th Guam Legislature. It is quite an honor to be afforded the opportunity to lead the House in prayer. Let us pray. Brothers and sisters, approximately 1 year ago, we met in this room and we swore an oath, a promise to our Lord, and we said, "I solemnly swear in the presence of Almighty God that I will well and faithfully support the Constitution of the United States, the laws of the United States applicable to Guam, and the laws of Guam, and that I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my duties as a member of the Guam Legislature." Lord, we recall the promise we made to you, and we ask your help, Lord. Help us, Lord, to remember that the oath made to you and in the presence of our brothers and sisters cannot be shaped by political convenience. Help us to remember that the oath does not bend to popular sentiment, political threat, or political ambition. Help us to remember that we do not compromise our oath. It compels us to adhere to the Constitution, the laws of Guam, and the rule of law. Help us, Lord, help us to meet faithfully our promise to you. God bless Guam, God bless this body, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
To express a never-ending and never-forgotten gratitude by the people of Guam, the legislature recognizes recipients of Imlazim Takilu na Sakrifisu on a display in the Guam Congress building and during each of its sessions. For the recognition of today's recipient of Imlazim Takilu na Sakrifisu, Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Lance Corporal Alan James Damien and the family of Lance Corporal Alan James Damien for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and country.
I'd now like to recognize La Voce from Simon Sanchez High School. They will be leading us in the recitation of the Inifrese, the singing of the Guam hymn, and the singing of the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight Siku Nanina Sinyahu, Hua Fresu Maisazu, Kalabai Hutehi, Zanhu Defendi, Ihinenki, Hikotura, Ilengwahi, Airi, Ihanum, Zanitanu Chamoru. Ni Irin Shaku, Dedetu Ginanzu Ostata, Esi Hua Fitma, Gihilu Ibibia, Zani Banderahu, Ibanderan Wahan.
Situs Maasi. That was very good. Clerk, please take roll call.
Senator Barnett. Senator Blas. Senator Brown. Senator Dueñas. Senator Fisher. Senator Lujan. Vice Speaker Munya Barnes. Senator Parkinson. Senator Perez. Senator Kanata. Senator Augustine. Senator Siniclis. Senator Shelton. Senator Titlegree. Speaker Terlahi. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Situs Maasi, Clerk.
Madam Speaker, if I may,
Yes, Acting Majority Leader, you're recognized.
to move to excuse all members not present at this, Madam Speaker.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to approve the Legislative Journal dated November 27th, 2023, subject to any corrections, Madam Speaker.
On that motion to approve the Legislative Journal, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal, please.
On that motion regarding communications and petition, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are messages from Imagahagan Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On that motion that messages from Imagahagan Guahan be appended to the journal, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sizus Masi Tatlo. Madam Speaker, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On that motion regarding reports of standing committees, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, there are no reports of select committees.
Situs Masi. You're recognized, Acting Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that bills introduced, bill numbers 205-37 LAS through 207-37 LS and 208-37 COR through bill 211-37 COR, 212-37 LS and 213-37 COR through 232-37 COR, and resolutions introduced 257-37 LS through 267-37 LS, 268-37 COR through 277-37 COR, 278-37 LS, and 279-37 COR through 302-37 COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On that motion regarding first reading of bills and resolutions, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We are now on motions, colleagues. Majority Leader, you are recognized under motions.
Madam Speaker, I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of this legislative session be considered first read and adopted, and to allow the Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized under motions.
Madam Speaker, can I have a moment's recess, please, to confer with you? Just a moment's recess, please.
1 minute recess. We're back from recess. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at this time, I'd like to move to open the nominations of the Clerk of the Legislature's attaché.
To resolve into Committee of the Whole.
You want me to resolve? Okay, Madam Speaker, on the motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole to conduct the election of the Clerk of the Legislature.
All right, there's a motion to resolve into Committee of the Whole for the purposes of conducting the election of an attaché of the Legislature, that is the Clerk. Is there any objection to that motion? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We are resolved to Committee of the Whole. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to open the nominations of the Clerk of the Legislature's attaché position.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Are there any nominations?
Madam Speaker, if I may,
Yes, Acting Majority Leader.
thank you. I move to nominate Joaquin P. Tadegui to serve as the Clerk of the Legislature.
Are there any other nominations? Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to close the nomination at this time,
On
Madam
that motion to
Speaker.
close nominations, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Colleagues, on the nomination of Joaquin Tadegui to serve as the Clerk of the Legislature, are there any objections?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Tadegui. If I could ask you to please come before and raise your right hand. Please repeat after me. I, and state your name,
I, Joaquin P. Tadegui, solemnly swear
in the presence of Almighty God,
in the presence of Almighty God
that I will well and faithfully serve
that I will well and faithfully serve
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the laws of the United States,
the laws of the United States,
applicable to Guam,
applicable to Guam,
and the laws of Guam,
and the laws of Guam,
and that I will conscientiously
and that I will conscientiously
and impartially
and impartially
discharge my duties
discharge my
as
duties
the Clerk of the Legislature
as the Clerk of the Legislature
of Iminitrintes Yatinale has returned Guam.
of Iminitrintes na Legislature in Guam.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk and Majority Leader, you are recognized. On the motion to rise, shall we rise?
Madam Speaker, on the motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole,
There's a motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now back in regular session. We are still under motions. Are there any other motions? Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding House rules, I move to place Bill number 230-37 COR, co-sponsored by myself, William A. Parkinson, an act to amend subsection 40101 of Chapter 40, Division 4, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to abolishing the post of the Sinahanya Vice Mayor, onto the end of the session agenda. So we could hear it potentially next week after it has at least 5 days to go through this body. And I would like to note that this bill was heard last week, Thursday, January 18, 2024. The committee report on this bill was filed the following day on January 19, 2024, and it's posted on the Guam Legislature website. Madam Speaker, it is important that we move swiftly on this matter before the Guam Election Commission holds a special election to fill the vacancy for Sinahanya Vice Mayor, and I hope my colleagues will support this motion as the legislature continues to strive for a more streamlined and efficient government.
On the motion, notwithstanding the rules, to place Bill number 230-37 on the session agenda, is there any objection? Senator Fisher, is that an objection?
I do have an objection. I also move to divide the question.
How would you divide the question?
One, shall the House suspend the rules pursuant to 1.02? And secondly, whether or not we'll move that, if we do suspend the rules, whether or not we will add it to the agenda.
There's a motion to divide the question. I think that motion puts before us a separate question, whether to suspend the rules for all of our proceedings.
Yes, ma'am. Our standing rules require that the suspension of the rules be done on a majority vote of the House. So the question is, shall we suspend the rules? And if we decide to do so, shall we place this motion, or rather this bill, at the bottom of the agenda?
All right. Is there an objection to his motion to divide the question? There's an objection. So all in favor of motion to divide the question, please raise your hand. Motion. Motion fails. All right, so on the motion by Senator Parkinson to place Bill number 230-37, notwithstanding the rules, onto the session agenda, is there an objection? There is an objection by Senator Fisher. Senator Teller, do you have an objection?
No, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in support of this. I'm one that always has very careful about, the 5-day rule and allowing the people of Guam the ample time to review the committee report in 5 days, in which Senator Parkinson put forward. I was there at the public hearing, Madam Speaker, and the importance of saving $150,000 to the people of Guam right now is what we're talking about here. It is an emergency because they began on February 8th. And you know, Madam Speaker, we don't start session until the end of February. So this is considered, to me, an emergency to get this through right away, and I thank the good committee chair for pushing this through right away and putting that committee out because of the emergency. So we've had both the election commission there, we had the mayor of Sinahanya there explaining the importance and how this needs to be rushed. The only reason why, Madam Speaker, that the bill wasn't heard earlier is because out of respect for Vice Mayor Iriarte, who, by the way, also agreed that a vice mayor should not be placed in Sinahanya because of the population count. But they respected it, because until he was laid rest to peace, that it would wait for the public hearing. So I stand in full support of this.
On the motion by Senator Parkinson to place the bill number 230-37 on the session agenda, notwithstanding the rules, is there any objection? Oh, sorry, there is an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Are there any other motions? Senator Paris?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to switch the order of Bill 165 with 104.
On that motion to switch the order of bills on the agenda from switching the place of 165 and 164, is there any objection?
Sorry, clarification.
Sorry.
It's 104 instead of 165, so switching the order of those two. And 104 is about junk vehicles. 165 is the mandatory collections.
All right, so where 165 is on the agenda right now, we will switch it to 104 and vice versa. Okay, on that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Are there any other motions? If not, I believe we will go to legislative concurrences. We are now on legislative concurrence. Senator Paris, you're recognized under legislative concurrence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning the nomination of Janelyn C. Damian to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Equalization with a recommendation to do confirm.
Senator Perez, we are under legislative concurrence, and there's a motion to place the nomination of Janelyn C. Damian onto the voting file. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Maritime Transportation, Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens the nomination of Christopher L.C. Duenas to serve as a member of the University of Guam's Board of Regents with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place a nomination of Christopher L.C. Duenas onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file, Madam Speaker, from the Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Services, Self-Determination, and the Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Accountability, and the Guam Build-Up, the nomination of Francisco A. Florig to serve as a member of the Guam Housing Corporation Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place a nomination of Francisco A. Florig onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee of Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Services, Self-Determination, and Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Accountability, and the Guam Build-Up, the nomination of Lillian Apena Guerrero to serve as a member of the Guam Housing Corporation Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of Lillian Opena Guerrero onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture the nomination of Ronald C. Pangilinan to serve as a member of the Guam Land Use Commission with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of Ronald C. Pangilinan onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Si Jus Masi Talo, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee of Maritime Transportation, Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens the nomination of Michael J.S. Robico, Dr. Michael J.S. Robico, to serve as a member of the Department of Parks and Recreation Commission with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, to place the nomination of Michael J.S. Robico, Ph.D., onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place from the voting file from the Committee on Maritime Transportation, Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens the nomination of Gurvinder S. Sopti to serve as a member of the AB Wanpat International Airport Authority Board of Directors with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of Gurvinder S. Sopti to the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Acting Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Si Jus Masi, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Services, Self-Determination, and Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Accountability, and the Guam Build-Up, the nomination of Victor R. Torres to serve as a member of the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority Board of Commissioners with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of Victor R. Torres onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. I believe we've completed our legislative concurrence. There are no items on consent calendar, so we will proceed to the second reading. On second reading, first bill up is Bill number 30-37 COR. Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to place Bill number 30-37 in third reading and would like the opportunity to discuss this bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 3037 has been a long time in coming to get to this floor today. It's taken close to 3 years from the time I introduced the original version in the 36th Guam Legislature, essentially to prohibit the employment of individuals that have been convicted of official misconduct from being employed in the government of Guam. It came to light several years ago that there was a loophole in the law that essentially allowed an individual who not only was accused of official misconduct, but convicted of official misconduct from being rehired in the government of Guam. The Attorney General's public response was essentially that an individual already convicted of official misconduct could be rehired in the government of Guam at the discretion of the director or head of a department or agency. That's a little too much discretion I think we should give, Madam Speaker, because we've already seen examples of where that particular discretion has been abused in this government. You know, we need to remind ourselves that the power to which we have, the power that we even possess today to be in the floor of this legislature, is the power that we temporarily are caretakers of from our people. They've given us this authority for a time, essentially, Madam Speaker, to be able to ensure we have the proper operation of government, and also to ensure that those that are in positions of responsibility, those that are entrusted with the power of the people, use that power responsibly. And when they use and abuse that power should be taken away from them permanently. They should not be given an opportunity to once again come back and re-offend our people. By definition, official misconduct is an individual commits an act relating to his office but constituting an unauthorized exercise of his official functions, knowing that such act is unauthorized, or he knowingly refrains from performing a duty which is imposed upon him by law, or is clearly inherent in the nature of his office. Madam Speaker, we've seen examples, unfortunately, time after time, where individuals that have been officially convicted of official misconduct have been rehired back in the government. And I ask my colleagues to seriously think if these examples that have occurred are acceptable. Do we think that these examples of these acts are acceptable to our people? Especially when we all go out to our people and say that we're here to do the right and responsible thing. We say that in the light of day, Madam Speaker. We say that while the sun is shining. But that's not how we always practice, unfortunately, in this government, and examples continue to occur. Certainly, one of the examples that were given by the Assistant Attorney General, Gloria Rudolph, who testified on this bill, was very disturbing. While it happened a number of years ago, it shows you how that type of discretion being left up to the director not only brought harm, but continued to bring harm upon children in our community. And that example was of a bus driver at Department of Public Works, a department that I myself had the honor of being able to serve for 2 years as the director. This happened a number of years ago, but it shows an example, and I'll tell you actually when the Assistant Attorney General read her testimony how disturbing it was. We had a situation then of a bus driver that we entrust our children to transport our kids safely to and from school every day. An expectation for our children that a bus driver should be a responsible individual like others that we would expect would be responsible to take care of our children. This particular bus driver repeatedly, on a number of occasions, molested children that he had responsibility of transporting. One the age of 9, one the age of 10, one the age of 14, and one the age of 17. And you have to ask yourself, if these issues had come to light, how could an individual that was supposed to be in a trusted position of responsibility repeatedly molest these children that were under his care to transport them to school, to and from school? In one particular case, the director suspended this bus driver when he was accused of having intercourse with a 14-year-old girl that he was supposed to be transporting on his bus. And the issue only came to light because the mother of this girl didn't understand why her daughter was coming home late every day from school. So the mother went to the bus stop, only to find out that her daughter was being sexually, I guess we could say, abused as an underage child at 14 by this bus driver. Imagine that, a 15-day suspension. Of course, nowadays, that's something directly that should be convicted of child abuse. Is that the kind of person we want back working in the government of Guam? Obviously, I think all of us in unison will say absolutely not. But that's where discretion, that's where not taking proper responsibility. And while it's painful, some people think, oh, we all should have second chances, third chances maybe. We can't be so harsh. We have to be considering of the individual, their families, their responsibilities. Well, to me, Madam Speaker, that individual that commits these type of offenses should be thinking about themselves and their family and their responsibilities and the things that they should be doing, and not abusing the power of the people that have been temporarily given to them. How about another example in this current government, Madam Speaker, of a teacher? Again, position of responsibility, a position we should respect, a position we teach our children to respect, because we want them to go to school, we want them to learn, we want them to be educated. But we have a case of a teacher that was having sex with their underage student. They were convicted of official misconduct. What did we do? What did the government do and the government officials that had discretion? They hired that individual back in the government of Guam. What a reward. Why don't we roll out the red carpet? Is that acceptable? Would that be acceptable to any of us here? Would that be acceptable to any parent in this community? Would that be acceptable to any grandparent in this community? I would think we would say, oh, not, absolutely not. But we wait, we let time go by, and then we just slip them right back in. How about, Madam Speaker, example 3, which is common. We'll wait for the next one. We'll wait for the next news story. The DOC guard. Have we had so many we stopped counting, Madam Speaker? Because I know a couple in recent history that were convicted of smuggling what? Contraband? Were they smuggling cigarettes, an extra bar of candy, toothpaste? No, they were convicted of smuggling drugs into the prison. Law enforcement, the very people we entrust with such power and responsibility to ensure that they are protecting our people. But no, they're the carriers. They're the ones bringing it into the prison, convicted of official misconduct. And where are they? Let's guess. Rehired back in the government of Guam. And in some cases, in areas of sensitivity, that while we talk about this major drug problem on Guam and how cheap it is to get crystal meth compared to how it was 6, 7, 8 years ago, while we look at the crimes and the harm to our people that happen every single day in this community, what do? We reward those individuals that were put in positions of authority, a high position of responsibility, a position under which they have sworn to protect the interests of the people, and they violated that trust by doing the very thing they were hired to protect our people from. But what do? We wait. Maybe perhaps the right administration is going to come in that we have connections with, that our family has connections with, and my goodness, the red carpet gets rolled out. Even ahead of those law-abiding citizens in our community that never committed a crime, never offended their people, who are willing to work hard, but they just didn't happen to have that connection that moved them to the front of the line. What example, Madam Speaker, are we setting in our community when we allow this? There should be consequences, especially when the offense is so offensive. And I can venture to say the 3 examples I've just given are just 3 examples, but they are highly offensive when you have people in positions of responsibility that abuse that authority. And that doesn't include all those in government that do it, that haven't gotten caught, that haven't gotten convicted. The whole process of going through this to get a conviction, I think the message should be very loud and clear in our community. These type of actions must be unacceptable. And individuals that commit these type of crimes against our people, there must be consequences. And these individuals, Madam Speaker, never, ever, ever should be allowed to ever hold a trusted position on behalf of our people. Sure, if they need to get employment, well, I guess they have to go elsewhere. But they should never have the opportunity again of having the trust of our people, of any position of benefit on the backs of our people when they have committed this degree of offense, the degree of offense to which they have been convicted. They should not be allowed to be rehired in this government. You know, we need to, I don't know what it is. I think maybe as time is going on, we're getting softer about these issues. And yet the crimes that are happening in our community that not only offend us, that bother us, that unsettle us, that make us always, you know, make that extra effort when we leave the house to make sure our homes are secured, or make sure they're all secured and the doors are locked at night before we go to sleep. Or when we get up to check on our loved ones in the middle of the night to make sure they're safe. Or wondering every time the dogs are barking real loud, is it safe outside? Who's out there? What are they doing? Are they going to bring me harm? That's the reality of many of our people every single day. We have a right to live in a community that has order. We have a right to ensure that all public officials, anyone hired by this government that are supposed to be working on behalf of the interests of our people, are doing exactly that. And when they're not, and when they're convicted of official misconduct, then by all means they should suffer the consequences. Hopefully, Madam Speaker, this is a deterrent. Hopefully these standards are being put in place to discourage anyone from being irresponsible. Because we have a tendency to think that once we occupy a certain position in this government, or maybe we've occupied it for a while, that power is ours. That power is ours to use and abuse. And I think we need to send a very clear message on behalf of our people, but that is absolutely not acceptable. And if you cross that line, and you misuse the authority of which the people have given you, and you've abused the authority to which the people have given you, then there should be a hefty consequence. There should be a consequence to that. And certainly I think one more direct message that could possibly be there is you no longer ever get the opportunity to pretend you're serving in the interest on behalf of our people. So with that, Madam Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Senator Brown. On Bill number 30-37, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? On the bill, Senator Fisher, you are recognized.
Thank you, and I also thank the sponsor of this bill. It makes absolute sense, of course. Once the fox has been caught in the hen house and chucked out, we never let the fox back in. You know, what's that old, you fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I totally join in the sentiments expressed by Senator Brown. It couldn't be more clear. You forfeit the right to work for the government of Guam when you commit a crime, just as we wouldn't let a person who committed criminal sexual conduct have an official position in which they were taking care of our kids. You know, it goes all the way up the line. We wouldn't re-elect a seditionist as president. How is that any different? So I hope all colleagues will join in supporting this. Thank you.
Senator Fisher. On the bill, Senator Nicholas, you are recognized.
Morning, Madam Speaker. Morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Senator Fisher for that very patriotic prayer and the eloquence of Senator Brown in discussing her bill. I rise in support of her bill. And when she was discussing, esta para be muta guni gisizao sa todui edi ini aplatsa, all the stuff that she was discussing, it just was very disheartening. So just wanted to stand and support her bill. I can't be as eloquent as her. She's just really awesome at it. And she really said all the everything that needed to be said about the bill. But I agree with her wholeheartedly, and I support this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sejus Mossy, Senator Sir Nicholas. On the bill, Senator Teitzke, you are recognized.
Sejus Mossy, Madam Speaker, and good morning, and I do apologize for my tardiness. This morning I had a doctor's appointment. But Madam Speaker, I'd like to stand in full support of Bill 30-37 and ask my colleagues to do the same. While I know people are deserving of a second chance, we also have to look at the questionable hiring practices we've seen and continue to see. We have to also remind ourselves the funding that pays for these salaries are entrusted to us by the people of Guam. Do they have those same feelings when their children or grandchildren gets on a school bus? Do we do what we could to ensure their safety? Or the engineers who inspect the buildings our community utilizes are confident our port will stop drugs, invasive species, and other unlawful items from entering our island? It seems quite necessary to add this common sense law to our books for further emphasis that's needed for the government of Guam and their officials to be serious about the quality of employees we hire to serve in the public's capacity. But most especially, to do what's in the best interest of our government by ensuring that those entrusted with official government of Guam documents, finances, safety, and controls are held at the utmost standard for our trust and compliance. Bill 30-37 is a law in the right direction, is a law, again, that will set the standards of trust and compliance that our people deserve. So I ask my colleagues, please support Bill 30-37 and thank the Senator for continuing to introduce this bill, even in the 37th. Well, it was not heard in the 36th, so I commend her for not giving up on something as important as this common sense bill, one that's entrusted to us to do the right thing for our people of Guam, for their safety and their children, safety as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this measure.
Sejus Mossy, Senator Teitzke. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Sejus Mossy, Madam Speaker. I think it's really important that we hold people accountable, and then to ensure that those crimes, that if they commit those crimes, that they are not, allowed employment in government. But the one thing, the reservation I have is that according to my research, so it states that official misconduct has often been used as a plea bargaining tool for minor offenses when prosecutors lack evidence or trial will be too costly. And the intent here is to punish officials who misuse their position, of course, which is important, but its use as a plea bargaining tool often can result in guilty pleas for offenses that have nothing to do with the defendant's misuse of his position. So it could apply to, for instance, I guess my general concern basically is, I think we need to get a full picture of what does this entail. I mean, is it, is there a heterogeneous amount of offenses and some that are more egregious, for instance, like the examples that were brought up by the sponsor of the bill, versus offenses that an employee may not be fully educated and have committed, an offense and therefore be caught on this misconduct. So I guess the question for the sponsor of the bill is, has that been considered in the creation of this bill in regards to ensuring that the punishment fits the crime?
Jesus Masi, Senator Paris. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? Sorry. Are you asking the sponsor to yield? With Senator Brown, would you yield to the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I will yield. I certainly understand the concern that Senator Perez is raising. If it's being used as a mean of plea bargain, then I guess maybe they can stop using it. I think in most cases, this idea, I'm sure if it's a minor issue, it'll be looked at such, but that's not been the case, and that's not been our experience with regards to official misconduct and those that are convicted of it. And while I understand there may be minor, well, I'm sure that should be considered at the time if it goes before a judge, or if it's something that the action of an employee is looked at and addressed internally with regards to the administrative process that can be addressed if an individual has done something wrong but is not looked at as a serious offense. But in most cases of official misconduct, these offenses are serious. And certainly while the examples I gave are considerably high, but they're the reality that unfortunately is occurring in our government. I'd like to think that corruption is the exception. My experience in running several agencies in this government is, unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a little more common than we'd like to think. And unfortunately, it's not dealt with as often. The cases that we've heard of actually legal action have been taken. Many cases in this government of these type of offenses, unfortunately, maybe the lack of resources, the drive, the political will to do it, action in most cases never is taken, and these offenses happen, continue to happen, and unfortunately our people are left at the other end and the short end of the stick. So I certainly understand the concern, but I think the better interests of our people are going to be protected for those that actually come forth and are convicted. It's not an accusation. It means you've actually been convicted of an action. And certainly if it's used as a plea bargaining tool, and as I mentioned, maybe they need to stop using it, especially if the individual employee or former employee realizes what the consequences is if they do plead guilty to official misconduct. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on that question.
Jesus Masi, Senator Brown. Senator Parrish, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the sponsor of the bill for her answer. I guess the other reservation is the $20,000 fine and a year, up to a year. So according to, I guess, the common practice for misdemeanors is that there is more of a, I think there was less, the amount is less for misdemeanors. And I believe, I'm not sure if the year imprisonment it also aligns with what typically is assigned for misdemeanors. So I guess if the sponsor of the bill can yield to the question about how this was determined.
Will the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, I will, Madam Speaker, and I know that Senator Blas will have comments with regards to the question that Senator Perez is raising. The one-year requirement is actually applicable to misdemeanors, to my understanding, in terms of up to. Again, we're not mandating it. That's something that's at the judge's discretion. If he or she decides that the offense would require time to be served, then by all means we leave that to them, that it could be up to a year. And also the fine is up to, it could be zero, it could be up to $20,000. Other jurisdictions like New York can be up to 10 years you can be convicted, and over $100,000 plus in penalties can be issued if you're officially convicted of official misconduct in court. So while I understand this may be looked at as severe, I think the actions that would involve an individual being essentially convicted of official misconduct, it would be in line in my view. And we leave that up to the judge to determine if that amount of time or that amount of money is appropriate to whatever the case may be that's before them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Jesus Masi, Senator Parrish, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, so this bill definitely is a wake-up call. I was the sponsor of the bill to ensure that the ethics education be required of all Government of Guam employees. And so it really should up level the type of training that comes with ethics training, so our civil sector is fully aware of any kind of infractions and what the consequences are. So being that this bill proposes pretty stiff penalties and consequences, it's really important to have that accompanying education to ensure that our civil sector, first of all, is doing right by the people, what they were required to do as public servants, and definitely not to, be complacent. I think that's one of our biggest problems is complacency in our government, where we assume that what we're learning from our next, what we're learning in the workplace is the actual, the right way to do things and to seek better ways of serving the public. And of course, I don't condone any of these infractions. I think it's egregious to have people in our government to do these things. So I thank the sponsor for this bill. Thank you.
Senator Paris. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation, and initially, I thought there wasn't enough support that didn't see the necessity for me to go ahead and just go ahead and vote yes on the bill. In support, just to vote yes on the bill. However, I appreciate and I understand the concerns brought up by the previous speaker with regard to the construct of the penalties to official misconduct. I want to say first, Madam Speaker, that official misconduct a lot of times is attached to other offenses that may have been committed or that were committed by in this case, the employee. Official misconduct is primarily an offense that is specific to government employment and an individual who's holding a position of trust within the community. So, first off, when it was constructed as a misdemeanor, it was recognized that, I'm sure it was recognized that while a misdemeanor here, it is a misdemeanor because of another offense, or it was charged out because of another offense that was committed while in service, while in government service. So, that said too, there could be arguments, and I would be in support of actually raising the prison term that could be imposed on an individual. What that said is the language that is contained in this bill, while I don't necessarily see it as problematic in that misdemeanors as defined by Chapter 80 of Article 3 of 9 GCA says that misdemeanors can be punishable with fines of up to $1,000. This language here proposes that it may go even higher than that. It gives the discretion to the judge. That said, I'd like to be able to clarify that and provide, Madam Speaker, as we're speaking, I've asked the clerk to go ahead and propose the amendment to this. While it's being prepared, I would like to go ahead and speak to it. It basically would provide that in page 3, line 1, under subsection...
Just a minute. Please proceed.
Thank you. Page 3, line 1, where it says, basically, C, a person convicted of official misconduct may be imprisoned for a term of up to 1 year and may be ordered to pay a fine of up to $20,000. Just for a point of clarity and to provide preciseness to it, I'd like to, after the term of up to 1 year and a comma, notwithstanding subsection 80.50C of Article 3, Chapter 80, Title 9, Guam Code annotated, may be ordered to pay a fine of up to $20,000. This is again, unlike other misdemeanors, this has my justification and my reasoning for this is that this is a crime committed in a position of public trust. This is a crime committed by a government employee or an individual who has been entrusted by the community to provide services in behalf of the government. And when you've got that position of trust, that position of authority, as was mentioned by the earlier speaker, in earlier testimony, this is while you are being paid by public funds to utilize public funds. And so, obviously, it's more egregious than most other misdemeanors. Therefore, I feel it's justified. I agree with the author of the bill that this is an offense that warrants more than what other misdemeanor offenses can basically, or the penalties that other misdemeanors can be imposed with. So therefore, to tighten up the language so that there is clarity and there is authority to be able to do it, is provide that amendment so that it shows that it's notwithstanding what we've got already in books, but because it is a more egregious misdemeanor offense, it deserves a higher monetary penalty. So, with that, Madam Speaker, can I get a 30-second recess to make sure that it's been passed out so that it can be reviewed?
All right, they're running copies now. It's uploaded on the drive. In the interim, Senator Blas, would you mind? The section that you're saying notwithstanding, do you have that? Are you able to read it?
Yes.
Please.
It says, notwithstanding subsection 80.50C.
You able to read that subsection onto the record? Yeah.
Will I be able to read it? Yes, I would. Under 80.50 of Article 3, entitled Fines and Restitutions as Sentence Allowed, Limited, a person who is convicted of an offense may be sentenced to a fine or make restitution not exceeding, and in the area of C, $1,000 when the conviction is of a misdemeanor. So what this will provide is a notwithstanding that provision, we can go up to $20,000.
Sidus Masi, the copies are now being distributed. We will take a brief recess until they're finally distributed. Distributed, Sidus Masi. Senator Blas, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, I think in the interest of time, if the colleagues can just go ahead and review it, I ask the colleagues for the support of this amendment so that we can make sure to clarify the intent.
On the bill, on this amendment, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized? Senator Taitigui, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the author could yield to a question I have on Section 80.50, what area of the law is this that makes it different that we have to cite 80.50 versus the 49.9 in which it's cataloged into the Guam Code annotated? What is 80.50 cataloged in?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, 80.50 defines the fines and restitution for sentences that can be allowed. And so in order for clarity and to ensure that it's in conformity to our statutes, while, official misconduct is an offense by itself, as the misdemeanor, it has been further defined, and the sentences and the kind of penalty, monetary penalties that can be provided are provided in a separate section within the Guam, Title IX of the Guam Code annotated.
Senator Taitigui, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the author for also sharing me the section. He was faster at pulling up where that where 80.50 is in the Guam Code annotated. To concur with what is stated here in that section of the law, it makes sense now just to cover all angles. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity, and thank the author of this measure as well.
Senator Taitigui. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Barnett on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I had a question for the author. So the official misconduct it's a misdemeanor, right? And we're attaching this $20,000 fine to it. I totally support the bill. I haven't even spoke on it yet. I'm a co-sponsor, but I just wonder about the constitutionality of attaching such an excessive fine to, that's all. I just wanted to raise that point. I'm not sure if I'm asking a question or just making a comment for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? If not, then the sponsor may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I appreciate the comments and the concerns brought up by my colleagues. And the language as proposed here provides so that it is constitutional. It does pass the muster in this thing. Again, as has been defined in statute, misdemeanors, are typically provided sentences of imprisonment of up to 1 year and a fine of up to $1,000. This, however, I believe, and I have to agree with the author of the bill, is that this is a more, for lack of a better term, serious misdemeanor, serious crime. If we're not going to be able to impose because the imposition of a sentence here, more than likely this official misconduct, is along the lines or complements other offenses that were committed. We just want to make sure that monetary-wise, that it does have the muster, it does have the provision and the authority to be able to do this, to provide of up to $20,000. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Blas. On the amendment, all in favor, please raise your. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. On the bill, Senator Blas, you're still recognized on the bill?
I support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill as amended? Senator Barnett, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Certainly rise in support of the bill. And it's a little funny backstory when the author of the bill reached out to me to ask me if I'd like to co-sponsor it. I thought I had missed something because, as was indicated in her opening remarks, this bill has been languishing in committees for a number of years. And so when she asked me to co-sponsor the bill, I said, oh, Lana, I thought that passed already. And it had, in fact, had not passed. So I thank you for the opportunity to be a co-sponsor. And I just wanted to try and talk about this bill without mentioning the big elephant in the room, the name of the elephant, because this is a story that I followed and reported on very closely when I was a member of the media. But I kind of wanted to go back. So specifically for me, this bill is really about the scandal, the conspiracy to import crystal methamphetamine into our island's prison. And this scandal, you know, was discovered, made all the headlines back in 2017. And I just want to go back and read a couple of these media reports. And the two inmates who had centered on this were Bruno Simmons is one, and then the other one, Johnson, very well known in the news all the time. So a search warrant was obtained for phones and records were checked according to documents. The phone records revealed that the two inmates were in contact with several people, to include Department of Corrections officers, a number of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe 6. DOC officers were receiving payment to smuggle contraband, including cell phones, tobacco, and illegal substances into the prison for the DOC inmates. Johnson and this particular former corrections officer that I believe is the inspiration for this bill communicated back and forth about bringing methamphetamine into DOC. And when shakedowns were going to occur, and so I can understand when we talk about people who have, you know, made mistakes, people who are maybe addicted to crystal methamphetamine, you know, going through recovery, getting that second chance. I'm all for second chances, but sometimes it seems like our government is out here giving out seventh chances. But to be in a position of authority, especially as a law enforcement officer, you ask anybody who wears the badge, whether they're wearing the GPD blue or the DOC green, once you put that badge on and you swear that oath, you are held to a higher standard. And when you're held to a higher standard and you violate that standard, our people, I think it's safe to say, believe that the punishment should again fit the crime. And in this specific case, that was absolutely not the case. In fact, I question whether there was even punishment doled out. As we recall the events of this, all these cases were pled out. And then a couple years later, this individual, we started hearing rumors about this individual being hired down at the port. And I'll just say for the record that we know this individual is very connected to one of the highest elected officials in our island. And so this was also brought up by the representatives of the Attorney General's office at the public hearing for this bill. The thinking was, why would you take an employee who violated the public trust and was involved in a conspiracy to promote crystal methamphetamine, to smuggle in crystal methamphetamine, why would you put him at a port of entry? I mean, of all the agencies in the government of Guam, you know, you could have put him over at the Guam Energy office and so I know that this individual had got the job. I had actually interviewed this elected official that's connected to the individual, and he said I had nothing to do with the hiring. I don't think he had to have anything to do with the hiring. I think it was clear that this individual, because of their connections, was to be given opportunities that the other DOC officers who were also involved in this case were not given. And I believe it was because of that connection to this individual. And if you look at the staffing pattern now, this individual has gone from being a safety coordinator to now holding the position, I believe, of a marina manager. So when we talk about the punishment fitting the crime, it's perverse. It's perverse that we have a group of individuals, yet one of them who has obvious connections was not punished. And in fact, outside looking in, it almost looks as if they were rewarded for this behavior. And so, of course, I support this bill. I think this is a standard that is needed. It's really a no-brainer to me. It's a no-brainer that we need to have a standard like this. If you are in a position of public trust, you violate that trust, we send you walking out the door, guess what? You shouldn't be able to come back in. You shouldn't be able to come back in no matter whose brother-in-law, whose cousin, whose Nino, whose uncle you are. But I think more importantly, the people of Guam should know what kind of leaders they are electing. Are we electing leaders who are going to treat people fairly? Or are we electing leaders who are going to use their power as an elected official to protect and promote their friends and family? And I don't know if there's a bill we can introduce here to stop that from happening. And take all of these things that I just said and open up the news today, yesterday, tomorrow. There's going to be news about crystal methamphetamine, people who are addicted to this drug, who are stealing from us, who are breaking into our homes, who are murdering on our island. And the people who are involved with the dealing of this poison should be punished the harshest. We should not be rewarding people who are involved or were involved with conspiracies to smuggle crystal methamphetamine. Full stop. That's a no-brainer. That's common sense. You ask anybody out here if they agree with that statement, I'm pretty sure they will. But again, it goes down to the types of leaders that we're going to elect. We need to elect leaders, and we need to hold our elected leaders accountable for what's going on out here in the streets. And so when we know that many of our family members struggle with crystal methamphetamine, we know that when they go into prison, oftentimes crystal methamphetamine is easier to get inside the prison than it is out here in the streets. And so it hurts my heart when we walk around pretending we don't know who's involved with the poisoning of our people, with the poisoning of our island. And you have to wonder, as the author of this bill said in her opening statement, what happens in the brightness of day and what goes on behind closed doors under the cover of darkness. So this is one instance where we see in the brightness of day, Dalai, I thought for sure they wouldn't, there's no way that they would roll out the red carpet all the way down to the Port Authority of Guam to ensure that this individual was taken care of. In fact, when I interviewed the elected official about this, I asked the hard questions, and the answer I got, and I'm going to paraphrase here, was, Namasi a day, he has plenty kids. And so I think from the top on down, we have to be very firm in the message that we're going to send, not just to the people who are addicted to crystal methamphetamine. There's no silver bullet for this. You can't take a shot. You can't take a pill. Look at the crystal methamphetamine that's out here in our streets now. Our police officers are tasing these addicts, but the crystal meth is so strong, the taser doesn't even faze them. And this has happened multiple times. You talk to the feds, we're all wondering, are they putting something in this crystal meth? But even if they aren't, I think it's clear that we have to hold the standard. And if they're not going to do it over at Adelup, we have to do it here in the legislature. We have to send a statement that enough is enough. And that if you're in a position of trust and you're going to use that position of trust to pervert the very system of justice you're involved with and you're tasked to help execute its mandates, then I think we have to send a strong message. And that's exactly what this bill does. In fact, I want to send a stronger message. I was talking with the author. I mean, if we're going to fine the $20,000 for official misconduct as a misdemeanor, why don't we just make it a felony? But maybe that's a conversation for another day. This conversation, I just, again, want to say that if we expect change, it's not going to be easy. And we got to do things that are difficult. We have to step on some toes. And I know that this bill, there are some colleagues in this body who think that we're stepping on some very powerful toes. I say step away. Keep stepping, because that's the only way that we're going to send a message to these individuals that there are people in our government who are not going to roll out the red carpet, who are not going to reward this type of behavior. You know, it's one thing if you have someone in a trusted position struggling with addiction. It's a whole other when you have someone in a trusted position who is feeding that addiction for personal profit and personal gain. And that's where I draw the line. And so I ask my colleagues to support this measure, and I commend the author for her diligence. 3 years later, finally got this measure on the floor, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of it. Si Dios Masi, Madam Speaker.
Si Dios Masi, Senator Barnett. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? If not, Senator Lujan, you are recognized on the bill.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Good morning, colleagues, and Happy New Year to everybody. Madam Speaker, I rise in full support of bill, of course, 30-37 COR, authored by Senator Brown. Thank you for asking me to be a co-sponsor of the bill as well. You know, very simply said, Madam Speaker, you know, official misconducts have, you know, at least 5 principles, which means basically, first principle, fraud in office, willful neglect of duty, abuse of official power, excess of official authority, and oppression or the unauthorized intentional infliction of injury upon a person. This bill calls for, again, the person or individual who's been convicted of official misconduct. And as, again, one of the principles of official misconduct, I mean, the 5 principles of misconduct, if you've been convicted of one of these, it's common sense, as was mentioned earlier, common sense bill to be put in place to protect our government. We want to start cleaning up our government. This is, again, a common sense bill that we put in place. Remember, it's, again, after you've been convicted. Not just accused, but been convicted, been found guilty. By a jury of your peers. Been found that. So again, Madam Speaker, I rise in full support, and I hope that again, the rest of our colleagues, the 37th Guam Legislature, will be in full support of Bill number 30-37 CR. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Lujan. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? If not, the sponsor may close on the bill. Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and certainly thank you to all my colleagues for your support on this bill and your words of support for our people. You know, as mentioned by my good colleague, Senator Barnett, you know, this bill took 3 years to get on the floor of the legislature, primarily last term, Madam Speaker, because we could never get it out of the committee. There are committee members that never voted on this bill, and I know that Senator San Augustine, as the chair, circulated this bill not once, not twice, not 3 times, in order to get either a vote in favor, against, or not to report out, to at least have this bill see the light of day. And you know, it's a reminder to me again, you know, there's so many good things we get to do on this floor. And all the years that I've had the privilege of our people to be able to stand and speak on their behalf. But then it reminds me again how, you know, the ugly head of politics raises its face. And you see where members even of our own body, because of the dynamics in the politics, who they support and who they don't support, would let this particular bill languish in committee and never allow it to get on the floor. So I certainly appreciate all my colleagues in the committee that voted on this bill to report this out and put it here on the floor of the legislature for us to discuss today. You know, as I've always mentioned, as I'm getting older, I really appreciate our language because there's so words that are so appropriate, you know, that our people understand. And the simple word of "tai mamalau," no shame. Tai mamalau e no na tautau. That individual has no shame. And the fact that that word exists as a phrase in our language. Sa'adzi te mamalau. And we know what that means when it's said about somebody, that they have no shame. Because now we think anything goes and you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want depending on who you are and who you're connected to. And that should never be the case, Madam Speaker. I think most of our people would believe that should never be the case, especially when you are bringing harm, when you are taking your official position and capacity to which the people have given you, the privilege to which the people have given you, and abuse that privilege. And then expect to come back again and be put in another position of trust. And that applies to every single position in this government that the people of Guam have created and allowed us, including those of us in elective office, to serve. We should have a sense of shame when we do something wrong. Doesn't mean we're convicted for life, that we never have an opportunity to dust ourselves off and build again. No. But we should be ashamed, and we should take responsibility for that. Because you got to wonder in the first place, when someone's already in such a position of responsibility, what is going on in their mind that they would do what they do, that they would abuse the power of the people to harm the very people they're supposed to be protecting and taking care of and being responsible towards. I wanted to close my comments by actually reading the testimony, the last few paragraphs in the testimony by Gloria Rudolph, the Assistant Attorney General that testified with Douglas Moyland, our Attorney General, on this bill. And I think her words are very concise and very appropriate. She said, "There are numerous ways to damage public trust. It might be by dishonoring the oath of your office and imperiling the lives and safety of those who are trying to enforce law and order. It might be by taking advantage of the trust that the government position automatically affords you and by using it as cover for wrongdoing. Or it might be by putting children in the presence of dangerous people and in a dangerous place and doing nothing to remove the danger. Or worse, ignoring and allowing the danger to remain. Our official misconduct statute takes account of this unique power and access to public resources that the government employees have. If passed, Bill 30-37 would finally ensure that those who abuse the unique power of government and misuse, squander, or exploit their control over public resources will be expelled and prohibited from working in the government again." I think those words are very appropriate, Madam Speaker, with regards to what our sentiment as leaders in this community should be. We need to have standards. We need to ensure that people are responsible. And our people that are working in the government need to ensure, as Senator Sabina Perez mentioned, perhaps this needs to be added to the list of orientation for all our government employees. We should not look at our positions as an opportunity to take advantage. Because we see it. We see it time and time again, as Senator Chris Barnett mentioned. We are not given these positions to use and abuse them, to make sure that we, or our family, or our friends, our connections are taken care of. That's not the reason we're here, and yet we see it happen over and over again. And our people deserve more than an atan baba from those that actually commit these crimes, that have the nerve, have the absolute nerve, because no shame. They think they can look down at our people as if it's the people that have offended them. That's not acceptable. We have a responsibility as lawmakers to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our people. And if there are bad elements in this government that are abusing the authority to which they've been entrusted, then by all means, if they've been convicted of it, they have no right. They should have absolutely no right of ever sitting in a position of public trust again. So with that, Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill. I appreciate the support of my colleagues. Thank you very much. I'd like to make a motion to motion Bill 3037 to third reading.
All right. On the motion to place Bill number 30-37 COR as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations and Appropriations and further amended on the floor to the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Morning, colleagues. We're now on second reading, and the next bill is Bill number 116-37 COR as substituted by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture. The main sponsor is Speaker Teresa Lahaye, and it's an act to add a new subsections to Article 1, Chapter 61, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, amending subsection 61304B, 7 subsection 61309B, subsection 61310 of Article 3, Chapter 61, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated to amend subsection 66201.1 of Article 2, Chapter 66, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, and to add a new subsection 10104D9, subsection 10104A3, subsection 10106B6, subsection 10104C5E, subsection 10104C5F, subsection 10107G, subsection 1010388, subsection 1010389, and subsection 10107G4 to Chapter 10, Title 22, Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations relative to strengthening and harmonizing government agency enforcement capabilities and ensuring best mining or quarrying practices. Speaker Terlaye, you're recognized.
Sizuz Maasi, and especially thank you for reading that long title for me. I appreciate it. And I'd like to make a motion to place the substitute bill on. I have a substitute version to substitute on the floor. This version corrects formatting errors, some references and citations in the bill, and I'd like to move that that version be adopted.
On the motion to accept Bill 116 as substituted, and further substituted, are there any objections? Seeing none, motion passes.
Sizuz Maasi, colleagues. I'd like to move to place the bill 116-37 as substituted by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture and further substituted on the floor into the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on that motion.
Please proceed, Madam Speaker.
Sizuz Maasi. This bill, colleagues, is one of several bills on our agenda today and on our agenda during this entire term, which increases transparency and is geared towards the safety, the health of the people of Guam, and to protecting, for allowing us to commit to our pledge to Bahu Protehi, I Airi, I Hanum, Zanitanut Samoro. This bill began in the last term. We had a public hearing because there were concerns from our community regarding sites around Guam, clearly visible, that were possibly conducting mining operations. And we know that with the increase in development, especially for Department of Defense military projects, there is a huge demand for the coral up north. Some of it is superior in grade and quality and very highly valued. And this puts an immense pressure on our agencies who've been issuing permits for clearing and grading, sometimes in the guise of quarrying. That's what we've discovered later. So this bill will help these agencies to put guardrails and clarity, close the gaps. It will require additional transparency and disclosure by developers of their full intention and relieve hopefully some of that pressure on those agencies so that everyone is operating under the same rules with clear guidelines. This bill does not address all problems with quarrying on Guam. Quarrying is a highly destructive and therefore highly regulated industry. And most the real quarries on Guam are complying with local and federal laws. So this bill is really intended to mitigate problems for those who are under clearing and grading permits currently conducting mining operations or quarrying operations. So when we had a oversight hearing or a roundtable with regulatory agencies in the last term, we were very blessed to have the full participation and cooperation by the Department of Land Management, the Department of Public Works, the Guam Land Use Commission, the Guam EPA, the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, which is in charge of the coastal areas, the Department of Agriculture, the Guam Waterworks Authority, the State Historic Preservation Office, and the Water and Environmental Research Institute, or WERI, at DOG. And they all came in to gather their expertise and talk to us about the types of permits applicable to mineral extraction, the processing of these permits, the regulatory and enforcement responsibilities of each of their respective agencies under federal and local law, and the grading, excavating, quarrying, or other means of extracting minerals on Guam. It was determined at that hearing that legislation was urgently needed to address inconsistencies in problematic areas, especially due to the increasing pressures on these agencies. The committee report for this hearing can be found on the Guam Legislature's archive website and has been a valuable tool to inform on the topic of mineral extractions on Guam while we introduced Bill 116 on May 11th. This was after research and collaboration with these agencies and continuing correspondence with them. And we had a public hearing on the bill on July 19th, and the stakeholders again provided very valuable information. And we were able in committee also to make some additional changes. There was consensus about definitions. So Guam EPA supported that changes to the definition of mining or quarrying as a conditional use within M2 and M1 zones will trigger the public permitting process to ensure neighboring property owners and the general public are afforded an opportunity to have a say in the approval of any quarrying activities. This also ensures that mining and quarrying do not bypass the Guam Land Use Commission or the Application Review Committee. This is a review committee done for any land use applications by all these regulatory agencies. So this bill places quarrying, mining, as a conditional use in M1 and M2 zones. They distinguished quarrying from grading using 3 factors recommended by the Guam EPA: the size and duration of the proposed earth-moving activity, the efficiency and appropriateness of the grading design, and the creation of a substantial commercial benefit. The language was derived from, in part, by a recent court case in the CNMI, and where the court ended up defining those activities for purpose of regulation. The bill also clarifies the intent of conditional use extractions in agricultural zones. This is one of the big loopholes that is in existence today that the bill hopes to amend. The bill will restrict extractions in agricultural zones to biological extractions only, because these are agricultural zones and not mineral extractions. That was the loophole. The bill also provides mechanisms for more scrutiny of permits that will allow clearing, grading, grubbing, backfilling, excavating, and embankment. And this is under the Guam EPA's Guam Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Regulations. And it allows them to continue to have the authority to amend those rules as necessary. But because of the loopholes that existed, we are making amendments to those rules and regulations as well as to more specifically define those terms. The bill has included a 5-acre threshold for clearing, grading, grubbing, filling, excavating, embankment, or stockpiling, based on recommendations and best management practices for earth-moving activities from Guam EPA on the basis of total size. This is contained in the 2006 CNMI and Guam Stormwater Management Manual adopted under Executive Order 2012-01, and we're now putting that into statute. The Guam EPA regulations contain a requirement to work in phases, and the size of any single active disturbed area is limited to no more than 20 acres, with the ability of EPA to issue exceptions to this requirement. In addition, a U.S. EPA stormwater permit is required for any earth-moving activity that is 1 acre or larger in size, which triggers numerous additional requirements under the Endangered Species Act reviewed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. WERI also concurs that standards for closing quarries should be implemented. Since late 2021, Guam EPA began flagging and clearing and grading permit applications that appear to be quarrying. As of their report, there have been at least 60 notices of violation between 2018 and 2021 for clearing and grading, including one company for performing grading, clearing, grubbing, embankment, filling, excavation, and other earth-moving activities across an area of just over 29 acres with a grading permit. The Guam State Historic Preservation Office provided testimony that there was a violation for quarrying on 35 acres of property without an archaeologist, which destroyed the Lahuna site. The Guam Waterworks testified that a water well located near a quarry had to be shut down because it produced cloudy water. And the well was able to clear up after that shutdown. But the GWA has no regulations to govern the depths of quarries. They pointed to Guam EPA as the one who has the authority to regulate wellhead protection areas. Additionally, DPW denied renewal for at least one permit, including the activities of the Guam Raceway Park, because of extensive removal of minerals far beyond any plan that was submitted to them and far beyond any approval. DPW issued at least one notice of violation near the Mangilao Solar Farm and Marble Cave area, which was permitted for clearing and grading. However, DPW found that there was extracting and mining happening on that property. GWA testified that a hydrological geological assessment should be conducted at a proposed quarry site. WERI provided testimony that Guam EPA requires developers to complete a supplemental impact statement with a hydrological assessment of the area to be developed with specified boundaries. This, they they testified, is an effective way to evaluate hydrologically significant surface depressions, including geological and surface terrain features, and hydrological components. These features may then be incorporated into high-resolution digital maps that can be subjected to spatial analysis, the results of which are ultimately verified in the field. And BSP, the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, testified that they use these maps by WERI as part of their assessment of these resources. And it was BSP who recommended very clearly that defining biological extractive industry as, they gave us a definition which we have put into the bill, which is, so a biological extractive industry is that which includes harvesting of flora in an agricultural zone that is intended to be used as raw materials for other purposes. The extractive industry must not have detrimental effects to the long-term biological functionality of the property to provide future production of agriculture goods. DPW concurs that mineral extraction be restricted and removed from A rural zones. This is one of the things I'm actually very proud of in this bill, and I'm really urging my colleagues to help me get this passed, and the governor's support as well, because we are trying to promote sustainable farming on Guam, sustainable agriculture, and it's very important that we recognize that mineral extraction on agriculturally zoned properties makes that property forever unable to produce food. So we have expanded definitions, we have put in additional restrictions where there was a lack of them, and all of this is done to stand up these agencies and help them in their request for more tools to use to really distinguish between real quarries and those who are pretty much illegally quarrying under an agriculture zone or under a clearing and grading permit. And this in turn will protect our resources. As quarrying is it's a destructive to the land, of course. It also has severe implications for health because of air, safety, and I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone in here the impact of over-quarrying on our aquifer. So I'd like to thank all those agencies who came out very strong in support of this bill. Thanks to them for their very detailed, very hard work on the definitions, on the regulations themselves. And I know I think this is one of the harder bills that I have worked on. And, but I couldn't have done it without those agencies. They were really, I feel like I was very proud because some of them came to me and I didn't even know that they might have been involved. So, but they came to me because of what they have to do in the permitting process. They knew that there were loopholes and they knew that we needed to do something here at the legislature. So I asked my colleagues for their support on this bill. Sisus Masi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the bill, Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Acting Speaker. It's kind of threw me off there for a bit, yeah. Anyways, I just want to say a few things about Bill 116-37. I mean, this bill, like mentioned earlier, had an informational hearing in 2022. A discussion that actually took almost 2.5 hours. At that time, we had one of our colleagues during the 36th Guam Legislature who had experienced the issues of quarrying and some of the rules and regulations that didn't have any teeth, to enforce any kind of hazard to the area or the surrounding neighbors. It was quite extensive, and then continuing on right after the typhoon, another public hearing on this bill. I mean, the committee report is about 681 pages. That's the committee report. You can tell this has been really thoroughly reviewed by many of the agencies, as mentioned, but I think the greatest thing I liked about, getting this piece of legislation, which could use additional amendments to the current law to provide more teeth and fines to it, those violating the law when it comes to mining or quarrying or grading or any such matter that would destroy any kind of land, especially that over the aquifer. I mean, we rely on this coral that would help, filter the water going through the drinking water that we drink. That's why it's a very precious mineral that we have in the north, and we have to be very careful. Bill 1637 will establish these regulations needed to ensure the potential environmental and social impacts associated with mining and quarrying practice, with a focus on promoting sustainable development, protecting the environment, and safeguarding the well-being of the surrounding communities as well. Critical consideration of these activities include enforcement to addressing the closure process as well, and mitigating to damages caused by mining and quarrying. To the public input for those living next to these projects where health hazards will be addressed before a grading, mining, or quarrying begins. That was one of the biggest issues, that an M1 zone would not require to go to the Guam Land Use Commission for permit. It was almost contradictory. Yet M2 was questionable too. So you had DPW saying that it's not needed, it's needed to go through the Land Use Commission, and Land Management saying no, it's not, based on the law. So this definitely will clear that up, because I think it's very important, Madam Speaker, that we have that process in place, the Guam Land Use Commission, for the safety, well-being of our community, most especially. And of course, the number one, my favorite, transparency on what's going on. So that being said, to address the grading and mining of quarrying begins, as well as the required use and periodic updates to the stormwater drainage manual that will be used as the best management practice as a guidance. This was very important as well. I think this guides our regulatory agencies, our ARC review committee, as well as Guam Land Use Commission, to have a manual to look at for what is in the best interest, the best practice of moving forward on approving any kind of application. One of my biggest concerns too is the mitigation, the reseeding of these areas, because once you go into quarry any kind of area, you're destroying any opportunity at all for regrowth. To me, land is like gold, because the biggest commodity that we need to sustain ourselves is food. Food. We can't eat a bar of gold to stay alive, but food is most important, and we have very little land already on this island. I do have some questions, though, for the author of the legislation, and appreciate her taking my call over the weekend, because I did have some concerns that was addressed by having the substituted bill on the citations and the numbering. So I greatly appreciate that change. That took away half of my questions that I had.
Please go ahead and state your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to the author of the legislation, when the words conditional use is used, does this mean an application to the Guam Land Use Commission must be submitted and the process is the same for approval? So in the event conditional use, that's an automatic going to the Guam Land Use Commission is my question.
Speaker Chulai, would you like to yield?
Thank you, and I thank the author of that question. Yes, that's the goal, and that's what the agencies ask, is that as a conditional use, it will go to adjacent neighbors, and so they will have notice, and it will go to, of course, all of these regulatory agencies so that they will have input before the Guam Land Use Commission. That's where we're going to get our protections.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Tello, does that suffice?
It sure does, Madam Speaker, and I do have a couple more questions.
Please proceed.
Thank you. The original bill, it allowed for 5 acres of usage when we had the public hearing. We're talking about that, and giving an example of Hawaii and their ability to expand or not having such a low limit. And I noticed that the substitute bill does not make mention of a 5 acres limitation. So what has changed, and who will determine the limitation on the acreage to allow for quarrying?
Thank you, Senator. Speaker Terlahi, would you like to yield?
Yes, very much, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her work on this bill as well. That's correct. We wanted to put in a 5-acre limit for that. Anything beyond that would be a quarry. However, EPA already has regulations for soil and water erosion that they believe that they can control this with their current regs, which currently read 20 acres.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Chadwick, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do know that one of the private sectors as well was concerned about that limitation, for quarrying. It's quite small. So that being said, having some kind of guideline in place to review and having EPA to look through that is comforting, very comforting. The other question I have is in Section 7 of the bill, it incorporates Chamorro Land Trust to be a part of the review process if the permit is for Chamorro Land Trust property. Wouldn't we allow that same opportunity for ancestral lands? And I had this question in mind, thinking, okay, if Chamorro Land Trust property was given to an individual for umpteen amount of years, and then they turn around and want to subcontract or sublease that land, I'm sure there are guidelines that require them to go back to Chamorro Land Trust to change whatever they plan on doing. Maybe wanted to live there, or maybe now they want to farm there to go in agriculture. Well, ancestral lands, they too have the ability to lease properties, and of course, the guidelines to leasing any land or property spells out what they can and cannot do for that property. So it's almost similar to Chamorro Land Trust. So I'm pretty sure if anybody who wants to put an application in to change their intentions for that property, I'm pretty sure the T's and I's are dotted with ancestral lands. Well, so is Chamorro Land Trust. So I just want to know why we didn't incorporate that in the event property comes up that is ancestral lands, that they too have ancestral lands sitting on that committee or review in the event it is ancestral lands, like they do with Chamorro Land Trust. So I was just wondering why we didn't incorporate ancestral lands to the author of the legislation, if she should yield.
Speaker Terlahi, would you like to yield to that?
Sure, I think this was at the request of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, but I have no objection to including ancestral lands as well. Similar reasons, yes.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Terlahi?
Or Chadwick, right? Yeah. Okay.
Chadwick, I'm sorry.
Believe me, Speaker, I got an email from Public Health calling me Senator Tello Terlahi earlier this week. So that being said, I will offer an amendment to incorporate ancestral lands, just to be, on the safe side as well, in the event their properties are brought forth to the Guam Land Use Commission.
On that, so you're making the motion right now on the motion to add ancestral lands. Can you just, after what?
Yes. If I may, Madam Speaker, it's not in writing. I'm
going to take a moment's recess so you can just get it.
Okay, but okay.
Imina Trentasheti na legislature and Guam is back from recess. Senator Taitigui, I guess on that motion to add ancestral lands trust,
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker.
there is a motion to add ancestral land trust to that section.
On
provision.
Section 7, Madam Speaker.
On
if I
Section
may.
7?
Yeah, if you just give
Anyone
me,
wishing to speak on it? Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. I understand you have one more question, Senator Taitigui. I'll still give you the floor. You have several minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the question I have is on page 4, Section 4, line 9, title does not reflect the include. Oh, no. Many of that was my last one, actually, because that was one of the errors in sections that needed to be readjusted. But thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do, again, ask my colleagues to please support this measure. It's been a long time coming, 3 years in the making, actually, maybe a little bit longer, to put these guidelines in, these really, really needed guidelines. I remember Senator Nelson, who was very concerned because when you're quarrying, it's one thing to quarry and destroy that land and then never reseeding or, trying to mitigate what has been taken for regrowth. But, this quarrying also puts out a lot of dust in the air. And you have people, houses surrounding in that area where they're quarrying. I mean, that's a major health hazard. And when it was brought up during that public informational hearing, there was nothing in the books to actually stop this from happening because of the surrounding areas. It was a health hazard for those people living in that area. But according to EPA, there was really nothing in there to stop that. These guidelines are here to protect the safety and well-being of our community and our land as well. So we need to put this in place because there hasn't been anything really in the books for many, many years to address and enforce these things that are going on the island that is causing us to strip property that should not be stripped, to not provide mitigation process and reseeding and regrowth of areas that have been destroyed. And you got to remember, once you quarry an area, that's damaged for life. And we need to come up with ways of reseeding. I know I'm rambling on about that, but it's so important. We don't have a lot of land, just like on the landfill. The trash we're putting every day, we're going to need more property to open another cell shortly. So I stand in full support of this measure, and I'm sure that there will probably be more legislation coming up, to address other issues as we move forward, because this is quite huge, volume, 680 some pages. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot more that we need to do too. But in the meantime, let's start with a good beginning on this and correct some of the things that are right in front of our face. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Taitigui. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Anyone else? Senator Fisher, I will recognize you at this time, and then Senator Brown.
Thank you, Speaker. Actually, it's a question for the author.
Please state your question.
If she will yield to it. If this bill is enacted, will it impair any existing contracts?
Would you like to yield, Madam Speaker?
Thank you. I'll try to answer that question. I think the bill will definitely not impair any existing permitted activities. Especially those quarries operating with full disclosure as to those activities. It may impair activities that were not permitted. I guess that's what I'll say. And if they have not been permitted to remove the minerals from the property, then actually I'm hoping this bill will impede that. But it should not impede any current mining activities that have been transparent about. That's what they're there for.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Fisher, you still have the floor.
I'd like to thank Speaker Terlahi for that response. Well, I guess we will find out if this is enacted, whether or not any other people believe that their contracts have been impaired. Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're very welcome, Senator Fisher. Senator Brown, on the main motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I certainly rise in support of Bill 116 and certainly commend Speaker Terlahi for the time and effort to consolidate and put this bill together. You know, the concerns that she raised with regards to the type of grading that have happened on the island, it's not uncommon, and there have been repeated violations and abuse of this particular process, and I've seen them. Not too long after I left Guam EPA, I remember a major excavation in an adjacent village. Not only did they do a lot of illegal quarry practices on the property that they were never permitted because they never had a permit to do the clearing in the first place. They also installed a water well that was not permitted, and it just shows you in some cases, and especially with an agency like Guam EPA who needs to have their eyes and ears open but also be visibly out there doing enforcement, how these type of violations could so easily occur. It's not that hard to take a bulldozer and, you know, dig a few feet further down. And we've seen already, we saw that with a solar project that was, you know, permitted for GPA, their contractor, not properly addressing clearing and grading requirements, even though they were permitted. And then you also have an agency like Guam EPA that's supposed to be actively engaged on a project they permitted that they knew existed, not going out there and ensuring that those requirements were being followed. It's not uncommon also as you go around the island, and, you know, I always wonder too, you know, are these locations permitted? Because you have a clearing and then you just, you know, see the continued extraction of gravel for other purposes to be used on other properties. And we need to be mindful. A lot of people are not. You know, we take for granted, you know, when you ask your children, where does water come from? You know, they don't think that, you know, it comes from the faucet. They don't realize where that water comes from, where it travels, and whether or not we're able to keep it clean for them to consume. Especially up in northern Guam, where the various, as the speaker mentioned, you know, it's almost powder white when you grind the coral up there. You know, you ever driven up to the DPW quarry that's up there next to Kaiser? Drive down there and then look up. Look how much excavation has happened over the years, and that's where, you know, we get a lot of our powder white coral that's obviously of value in construction. But you have to ensure and recognize that that particular, you know, that coral helps filter the quality of our drinking water. It's very distressing when we were talking not too long ago about our water wells, you know, to realize the concerns of the amount of our water wells now that we have to filter because of contaminants that are in our water lens and that are being pumped back up. And that if they're not being filtered, not cleared out, then, you know, it's something that our people are consuming. That's assuming, of course, again, that Waterworks is staying on top, that EPA is also as vigilant doing the water quality inspections that they need to do, and also that they're ensuring that these reports on these monitoring wells around the island, that they're properly reviewing them and ensuring that what's coming up on those, what are the results that are coming up on those monitoring wells because of concerns of contaminants. When we excavate into the ground, excavate in particular to our coral, which is pretty much what most of northern Guam is. I mean, really, when you think about it, except for Mount Santa Rosa, which, you know, they tell us an old volcano, pretty much all of northern Guam pretty much is coral uplift. And we need to be mindful because that is where the largest percentage of our drinking water comes from. And then not only that, when the land is cleared and graded down, such as a quarry, what happens after? What is the use of that property? What can that property be used for? In some cases, of course, we do clearing and grading to be able to build, you know, be able to build a building, be able to build a home. But when the agenda really is to do the quarrying, like one of the requests to permit up north on Chamorro Land Trust property, you know, with the idea, oh, we're going to clear so we can terrace and we can, you know, create home lots. But the real motivation behind that is actually to quarry the property. You know, like our limestone forest up north, that so much of it's been destroyed. You know, imagine a limestone forest. I mean, it's challenging enough for me to grow something in dirt. What more to grow it on limestone? And how unique those forests are up north, and how quick, unfortunately, so much of it is being destroyed. There's very few areas, like when the Mangilo Golf Course was being built. I give credit to one of our former employees in the planning division, Randall Sablon, and Gary Stillberger that worked there at the time. But I know Randy was the main motivator by ensuring that when that golf course was designed, there were sections of that particular project that were set aside to preserve limestone forest, so that we have these resources for future generations to know, learn, and appreciate and experience. But we have a lot of abuse out there. You know, when there's a quick buck to be made and permitting agencies aren't doing their job, and gosh, I got that bulldozer, I got that excavator, they're out damaging our resources. And while they can say, oh, it's our private property, well, we have rules about how you can permit and use your private property as well. That's a reality whether we like it or not. And we need to make sure that these standards are in place so that we don't have the frequent, this is not as uncommon, you know, the frequent abuse that we see of property that they claim, oh, we're just going to clear it and grade it for this construction. And really the agenda is to excavate. And we all need gravel. I mean, imagine, Madam Speaker, our neighboring islanders, they actually have to excavate into their reef to get this type of material so that they could pave their roads and build their houses. That's frightening. I mean, we know the need to ensure that we protect our coral reefs. We also have to be mindful of what our land use is, and how do we protect the land, and how do we also ensure the proper filtering of our water. Because when we excavate directly into that, there is no filter system. And then the questions need to be asked, what is the purpose of the property after? Is it going to be left exposed, where there is no soil on top for anything to grow? What is the agenda? What are we going to do with that? I mean, we see abandoned quarries around the island that have existed for years. And not only are they an eyesore, but at that point, you've never seen any valuable use of the property. What's the purpose of it? If it's being excavated for a purpose and there's a land use plan after, where the community can continue to be, to continue to benefit, those are the kind of questions that need to be asked and answered before there's any excavation, especially with regards to quarrying. And then we also need to ensure that those quarries that are permitted are working within the guidelines. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we're really just guessing that we're not harming ourselves ultimately. We're assuming that we're not harming the land. But we need to address those issues, and we need to have these standards in place to do that. So with that, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of Bill 116. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
You're very welcome, Senator Brown. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Paris, I'll recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in full support of this measure. I think it's, again, like my colleagues have said before, it is a long time coming. It was a cause of concern to see all these quarrying areas pop up, and it's really concerning to see that our island being eroded before our very eyes. And I think what this does, it provides a means to regulate the practice of quarrying, which destroys a non-renewable resource, which is our land. And again, like my colleagues have said before, this, to me, our land is a natural wonder of the world, because it has provided for us for centuries, or millennia, I should say. You know, our land is very unique because it allows for the abundance of our water resource to exist, and for our lives to exist here on Guam. And I just, you know, I commend the author for her fortitude, you know, in ensuring that the problem, this is a long-term problem that required really a complex amount of work, and definitely commend her for that, in ensuring that our island and our people are sustained for many, many more years to come. And my hope is that, again, you know, I think a lot of the problems that we experience environmentally really require the concerted effort by many of our agencies. And what this bill does, it will move our government in the right direction to ensure that we are not working in silos, and that these gaps are addressed so that we can continue to protect what's so vital to us. So I want to thank the author, and I do request if I could be a co-sponsor. Thank you.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing none, motion carries. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Barnett, you are recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the bill, and I commend the author for her tireless efforts. I know this has been a long time coming, but it reminds me of the measure we discussed previously in this session. It's just one of those things that you're surprised wasn't in place, wasn't put in place years ago. So again, I commend the author. It's very hard work. I mean, reading the title was hard enough. But it's definitely much needed. And I was talking with one of my uncles about this mineral extraction, and he asked me, do we have minerals on Guam? The Cascao, remember back in the day, right? That used to be our Chamorro diamonds. And I remember that how many political favors used to be granted with, oh, so-and-so, you need Cascao for the Lisadzu? Okay, they're going to send down 5 dump trucks, you know? And I mean, even to this day, I still see, I don't know where they're taking it, but on the weekend, some of the DPW dump trucks, you know, just heading down south with the truckloads of the Cascao. But again, I commend the author because it's clear that there have been those in our community who have taken advantage of the absence of these types of regulations. And the actions of those individuals have impacted many in our community. And of course, I'm talking about the racetrack, where we were told, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission was told that it was clearing and grading going on there at the racetrack. Lo, come to find out, often a cluster clearing and grading. What kind of clearing and grading are you doing when you're digging down 80 feet? When you're excavating tons upon tons of this Cascao and making money off it. And it's not just happening at the racetrack, it's happening all over our island. And you can't grow it back. You can't grow back the Cascao, so. It's very important, and I ask for the support of my colleagues in getting this this measure through so that we can stop the hemorrhaging. You know, these regulations and others are long overdue. I mean, look at the news today where the PFAS and the pesticides in the drinking water, measures like this will only ensure that we'll see less of that in the future. And again, I just commend the author and for her hard work on this measure, and I rise in full support of this long overdue bill. Si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senator Barnett. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Speaker Chalahi, you may close on the bill.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much to my colleagues who spoke on the bill, and these are the same colleagues who also attended this hearing on the bill, and those who were here last term also attended the informational briefing we had in regards to coring activities. So I'm very grateful. Again, I could not do this bill without the help of those agencies such as Captain Bearden, such as Edwin Regis at the Guam Coastal Management Program, and Lola, the director of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, Randy Romero at DPW. He is the building permits administrator. And so because we're dealing with permits and so many rules and regulations, it was really their expertise that helped me so much in my office. And Andrea Pellicani, she's a master at managing this type of technical work and detail. And we had spreadsheets of all the testimony and all the rules that we were trying to impact, to make sure that we really change as little as possible, but make as much effect as possible at the same time. And so, again, this really is based on concerns that we can all see in Guam, our concern for our aquaculture, our aquifer, concern for when we say we want sustainable lands, that we are actually going to have sustainable lands as much as possible, and that we are going to quarry those lands only with great protections put into place. And I want to thank those legal quarries who have so many federal and local regulations to comply with, and who do so for, of course, our continued economic development as well. But again, this bill will require the submission of a site plan to also be in compliance with the wellhead protection radius. It will require a plan to prevent discharge of materials in excavated areas. A requirement to provide designated equipment servicing areas. Document the total cubic yards of material excavated and removed from the site and the % completion of removal. As you know, for example, at the raceway, this is one of the big disputes, is how much mineral was actually taken out. And as my colleague said, there were multiple tons in a truckload. I think I calculated this all at the hearing, and there were hundreds of truckloads per year removed. It will also require an estimated time in years until materials have been removed, and closure activities will be required to begin. These will no longer become a blight to our island. A site safety plan which specifically addresses hazards to neighboring residents and the general public. A quarry site closure plan. A slope stabilization plan, and stockpiling of all topsoil. This again is another one of our precious resources, is our topsoil. We have a very small layer of that, and once that is removed, again, removed from our available assets to be sustainable with. For quarries exceeding 20 acres in total size, a phased reclamation plan to limit the total area affected by quarrying operations. A final disposition of all site structures and the removal of proper disposal of all site equipment at the end of the quarry. Again, these are all needed and needed urgently due to the ongoing construction and the huge demand for these materials, and then our urgent need to protect health and safety of the people of Guam, to protect our water wells, our aquifer, by harmonizing our agencies' enforcement capabilities and ensuring best practices for mining and quarrying. And I'd like to add sponsors to the bill. I know Senator Perez, I think you entertained a motion to add her. Situs Maasi for that. I'd also like to add Senator Tellos, Senator Barnett, and Senator Brown as sponsors of the bill as well.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries.
Thanks again, and colleagues, I humbly ask for your support. Situs Maasi.
Can you please move the bill, Madam Speaker?
I'll reiterate my motion to place the bill on third reading. Bill number
116.
116-37 as substituted by the committee and further substituted on the floor and further amended on the floor.
Thank you. On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Bill number 121, the next bill on the agenda, be moved to the bottom of the agenda.
On that motion to move 121-37 CR to the bottom of the agenda, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Colleagues, it's about 11:40 right now, and we're going to go ahead and take a lunch break. We'll come back at 2. 2 p.m. We are in recess.